Good evening, everyone. It is once again Ted the Speed Learner, and tonight I'm going to do an updated version of my scroll lock video from way back in the day. It's been over a decade since I've done this topic, and I wanted to not only redo it, but also upgrade it. Now, you will see a key on your keyboard, and it will display SCLLK. That's what you're going to see on your keyboard. Now, it will not always be in the same position as mine is, because all keyboards, well, okay, a lot of keyboards are different. Mine is a split key from Microsoft, and it's really fancy. Not all keyboards are this fancy, so therefore finding the scroll lock is going to be a little harder for some of you than it is for me. Alright? But anyway, why was this key added to the keyboard? Well, in 1981, IBM introduced the first PC keyboard. Prior to this, keyboards were designed to work with dumb terminals. Okay? So basically, you'd have a computer, and the keyboard was inside. You know, you'd have a monitor and you'd have a keyboard, and there'd be this little wire that would come out of this little box, and it would send it right into the actual computer, which was a monster big piece of garbage. Okay? Or if you had a TRS-80, which would be a Tandy Radio Shack 80, the computer would actually be in the box, but everything was hardwired to it. You would have a hardwire from the keyboard to the motherboard of the TRS-80, same thing with the monitor. It'd be huge. It's kind of a dumb terminal there too. But IBM finally started inventing PCs, which are personal computers. And when they did this, things changed radically. You could actually, because the IBM PC keyboard was designed the way it was, if your keyboard broke, you didn't have to take the whole computer and throw it back to IBM. You could just take the keyboard off, put another keyboard on, and it worked just fine. That's why they invented it that way. Now, there were no standards to these keyboards except for the ones that IBM made. Now, every keyboard that IBM made was standardized. Everybody else, you were on your own. The first PCs didn't include a mouse. Only the PCs that were made by IBM. And I think Steve Jobs included mice on his app. He had Apple computers, so I think he included mice on his too. So these keyboards were produced with 83 keys. Okay. One section would be the QWERTY keyboard, which you'd be familiar with if you ever typed on a typewriter, and then you would have this numeric keypad on the side. Okay. And you'll find that virtually every computer that came out in those days had a numeric keypad on the side. Okay? Now, what would happen if a person was writing a long computer program or a text document, and they wanted to search through the document or computer program for very specific things? Since most of these people didn't have a mouse, they would have to either rely on the computer numeric keypad or the arrow keys on the keyboard. Some of these keyboards had arrow keys, some didn't. What would happen is that the numeric keypad would also be your arrow keys. Okay? But other computers actually had arrow keys and a numeric keypad. My computer keyboard actually has arrow keys and a keypad. If your computer keyboard had both arrow keys and a numeric keypad, then you were pretty much in great shape. If they didn't, however, that could be a different story. Now, this is why the scroll lock button was invented. Now, I know there's a scroll lock and a num lock, and I'll cover both here. Okay? Now, when it came to having the scroll lock key, if you were typing with your QWERTY keyboard and you actually bumped your arrow keys, you'd be going up and down through your document. And if you were writing in things like Visual Basic, or actually GW Basic, which was in the early days was called GW Basic, if you started a computer program, the computer program could just go, it would just go in this endless loop, and that scroll lock would stop that endless loop. Okay, but the scroll lock would also shut off those arrow keys, so that your hand didn't bump into the arrow keys and cause you to mess up and go to some different part of your document, which you didn't want to do. Okay? So, the scroll lock was used if you had arrow keys separate from the num lock. Okay? In other words, if you had a numeric keypad and you had arrow keys, you could shut off the arrow keys with the scroll lock. However, what if the arrow keys were incorporated in the numeric keypad? Well, that's where you came up with the num lock. And so what we do is you hit the num lock once, and you could type straight numbers. If you turned it off, then you would have your numbers as little arrows. So, is the scroll lock key used today? Well, it can be used in Microsoft Excel, or you could change it into some kind of shortcut key. That's up to you. Alright, I will tell you more in a future video, so I'd like for you to stay tuned.